Daf Yomi, Tractate Menachot, page 87a, top of the page, with the words Ha-Kemachim. Ha-Kemachim belo mishuleha b'pnei hashmarim el mevi mishlisha me'emtza'a. Flour like white film that floats on the surface. It says scum. I didn't like that word, so I used the word film. Not from the wine at bottom of the cask due to the sediment that collects there. Nor from the wine. You cannot use it from that. Rather, one brings the wine in its middle third. Ketzadu boidek. Hagizbar Yoshev v'hakane biado, zrak hagir hakish bakane. How does the temple treasurer inspect the wine to determine that it is from the middle of the cask? The treasurer sits alongside the cask and has the measuring reed in his hand. The spigot is opened and the wine begins to flow. When he sees that the wine emerging draws with it chalk-like scum, hagir, he immediately knocks with the reed to indicate that the spigot should be closed. Rabbi Yossi ben Rabbi Yehuda omer sheyesh bo kemachin pasul shneimar timimim yihiu lachem umin chasam timimim yihiu lachem v'nizkehem. Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Yehuda, says, wine in which there is flour like white scum is unfit for libations, as it is stated with regard to animal offerings, unblemished they shall be for you, and their meal offering shall be fine flour mixed with oil. Unblemished they shall be for you, and their libations. Numbers 28:19 through 20 and 31. This indicates that animal offerings, meal offerings, and libations must all be brought from flawless products. Therefore, the presence of flour like white scum in wine renders it unfit. That's the Mishnah, and now the Talmud. Zog the Talmud means the Talmud says, Ein mevin lo masok v'lo mevusha v'lo mevushan v'imhevi pasul v'hakes hadirei shem ein mevin es elistion v'imhevi kosher. The Gemara says, the Mishnah teaches, one may not bring libations from sweet wine, nor from boiled wine, nor from wine produced from smoked grapes. And if one did bring a libation from such wine, it is not valid. The Gemara asks, but doesn't the first clause teach one may not bring libations from sweet wine made from sun-dried grapes? But if one did bring a libation from such wine, it is valid? How can one clause teach that a libation of one type of sweet wine is valid, and the other clause teach that a libation of another type of sweet wine is not valid? Amar Ravina Kroch Vitani Rabashi Amar Chulia de Shimsha Lo Ma'is Chulia de Pera Ma'is. Ravina said the text of the Mishnah is corrupt. To correct it, combine the two clauses into one and teach with regard to all the wines mentioned that they are unfit to be used for libations. Rashi said the text of the Mishnah is correct. The reason for the difference between the two wines is that the sweetness of grapes sweetened by the sun is not objectionable, so libations of wine made from such grapes are valid, while sweetness that results from the sugars of the fruit itself is objectionable, so libations of wine made from such grapes are not valid. Ein Mevi'in Yashan Divrei Rabbi V'chachomim Machshirin Amar Chizkiya Mai Tamin Rabbi Amar Kra Lekeves Yain Ma Keves Ben Shnaso Av Yain Ben Shnaso. Second here. Okay. The Mishnah, Ein Mevi'in Yashan Divrei Rabbi V'chachomim Machshirin Amar Chizkiya Mai Tamin Rabbi Amar Kra Lekeves Yain Ma Keves Ben Shnaso Av Yain Ben Shnaso. The Mishnah teaches one may not bring wine aged for 1 year. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, but the rabbis deem it valid. The Gemara provides a source for Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's ruling. Rabbi Chizkiya said, what is the reasoning of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi? The verse states with regard to the libations that accompany the new moon offering, and their libations, half a hin for a bull, a third of a hin for a ram, and a quarter of a hin for a lamb of wine. Numbers 28:14. The juxtaposition of the terms lamb and wine teaches that just as a lamb is fit to be used as an offering only if brought in its first years, so too wine is fit to be used as a libation only if it is in its first year. Ima keves ben shtei shanim pasul af yain ben shtei shanim pasul v'chitem hachinami v'tanya yain ben shtei shanim lo yavi v'mevi kasher mai shemat lei amar lo yavi Rabbi ka'amar imhevi kasher. The Gemara asks, if so, take the analogy further and conclude that just as if one offers a lamb in its second year it is not valid, so too a libation of wine in its second year is not valid. And if you would say that this is indeed the halacha, that is difficult, but isn't it taught in Braita that wine in the second year may not be brought ab initio, but if one did bring it as a libation, it is valid? That Braita certainly expresses the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. As whom did you hear who said that aged wine may not be brought? Only Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi explicitly states his opinion in the Mishnah. And yet he states in the Braita, if one did bring a libation of aged wine, it is valid. According to Rabbi Chizkiya's explanation of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's opinion, such an opinion is illogical. And Amaravi, hi, new time of the Rabbi. Dichsiv al tere yain ki gis adam. Rather, Rava said, this is the reasoning of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, as it is written in the verse exhorting a person not to be enticed by fine wines. Look not upon the wine when it is red. Proverbs 23:31. Evidently, the redness of wine is indicative of its quality. After a year, wine begins to lose its redness, and so it should not be used ab initio. Nevertheless, it is still of a sufficient quality to be acceptable after the fact. The Mishnah teaches one may not bring wine produced from grapes suspended on stakes or trees. Rather, one brings wine produced from grapes at foot height and from vineyards that are cultivated. The definition of vineyards that are cultivated is clarified in a Braita that is taught vineyards that are cultivated twice a year. This is done by hoeing the earth underneath the vines. Rav Yosef Havale Karna di Pardisa Derafik Beit Fe Rifta V'Avet Chamra Dedore Mayo Al Chad Trin. The Gemara relates the efficacy of cultivating the land twice a year. Rav Yosef had a tract of land that was used, an orchard, the Pardisa, that to which he used to give an extra hoeing, and consequently it produced wine of such superior quality that when preparing the wine for drinking, it required a dilution using twice the amount of water than that which is usually used to dilute wine. Lo hayu konsin osam machatzavin gedolim tana chavios kadios ludios ubeninios. The Mishnah teaches when people produce wine for libations, they would not collect the wine into large barrels, as it causes the wine to spoil. Rather, it would be placed in small casks. The sages taught in Braita, the casks referred to by the Mishnah are flasks that are made in lud and are medium sized. The Gemara adds another halacha when storing casks containing wine for libations. They should not be placed in twos, meaning one atop the other, but rather singly, meaning each one should be placed separately. Ketzad boidik gizbo yoishev v'kana biyado zorak hagil hakish b'kane tana zorak hagil shel shemorim gizbo hakish b'kane. The Mishnah teaches, how does the temple treasurer inspect wine to determine that it is from the middle of the cask? The treasurer sits alongside the cask and has the measuring reed in his hand. The spigot is opened and the wine begins to flow. If he sees that the wine emerging draws with it chalk-like scum, a film, he immediately knocks with the reed to indicate that the spigot to be closed. The precise point at which he knocks is clarified in a Braita taught. If the wine draws it with chalk-like scum, which comes from the sediment, he knocks with the reed. V'leima lei meimar b'sei leila Rabbi Yochanan. De'amar Rabbi Yochanan kishem shedibo yafeh levesamim kach dibura liyayin. The Gemara challenges, why does the treasurer knock with the reed? Let him simply speak. The Gemara explains, this supports the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. As Rabbi Yochanan said, just as speech is beneficial to the incense spices, it wasn't just Rabbi Yochanan, it was Rabbi Nassan also. Rabbi Nassan, hadek hadek, hetev hadek, v'shekol yafel b'samim, that was Rabbi Nassan. But I guess they're saying Rabbi Yochanan said the same thing. Rabbi Yochanan said, just as speech is beneficial to incense spices, so is speech detrimental to wine, and so the treasurer avoids speaking. Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda Omer Boi Rabbi Yochanan Hikdisho Mao Shir Yadav Mishum Bar Mum came in the puzzle Kebal Mum Dami O Dilma O Bal Mum El Behema Teku. The Mishnah teaches, Rabbi Yossi, the son of Yehuda, says, wine in which there is a flour-like white scum is unfit for libations. Rabbi Yochanan raises a dilemma concerning such wine. If one consecrated it to be used as a libation, what is the halacha with regard to whether he should be flogged for consecrating it due to the prohibition against consecrating a flawed item as an offering? Does one say that since it is unfit, it is comparable to a blemished animal, or perhaps the prohibition to consecrate a flawed item applies only to an animal? Or concludes, Teku, the lemma shall stand on the result. Tanu Rabbanon, Eilim mimoav, Givosim Chevron, Agalim mi Sharon, Goizolos mehar hamelech. Having discussed which flowers, oils, and wine are fit to be offered in the temple, the Gemara considers which animals are of sufficient quality to be used as offerings. The sages taught in Braita, the choice rams are brought from Moab, the choicest lambs are those from Hebron, the choicest calves are those from Sharon, the choicest fledglings, meaning doves and pigeons, are those from the king's mountain. I'm guessing it's in Jerusalem, or near it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Mevin Kvasim, Shigavan kerachman. Amarav barav shela. My time with Rav Yehuda. Dichtiv yireh miknecha bayom hahu kar nircha. Rav Yehuda says one should bring lambs whose height is like their width, meaning they are so robust that they are as wide as they are tall. Rav Bar of Shila said, what is the reason for Rabbi Yehuda? As it is written, and he will give the rain for your seed, with which you sow the ground, and bread of the produce of the ground, and it shall be fat and bountiful. Your cattle shall graze in wide pastures on that day. Isaiah 30:23. The word kar can also mean a lamb, and nircha means wide. Accordingly, Rabbi Yehuda interprets this verse as on a homological level to be alluding to robust sheep. Ketiv. Al chomotayich Yerushalayim הפקדתי שומרים כל היום וכל הלילה. תמיד לא יחשו המזכירים את אדוני על דמי לכם. מאי אמרי? אחי אמרה ברב שלה אתה תקום תרחם ציון. The chapter concludes by quoting an additional prophecy of Isaiah concerning the rebuilding of Eretz Yisrael, as is written, I have set watchmen upon your walls, Jerusalem. They shall never be silent, day or nor night. Those who remind the Lord take no rest. Isaiah 62 verse 6. This is referring to the angels appointed by God to bring the redemption. The Gemara asks, what do these watchmen say to remind the Lord? This is what Rav Sheila said. They recite the verse, you will arise and have compassion upon Zion, for it is time to be gracious to her, for the appointed time has come. Psalms 102 verse 14. Rabbi Nachman Bar Yitzchak Amar, Bona Yerushalayim Hashem, Umikaramai Havu Amri Amarava Barav Shela Kibachar Adonai B'Tzion Ivada Moshav Lo. Rabbi Nachman Bar Yitzchak says they recite a different verse. This verse, the Lord builds up Jerusalem. He gathers together the dispersed of Israel. Psalms 147 verse 2. The Gemara asks, and initially, when the temple still stood and the Jewish people were gathered together in Eretz Yisrael, what would the watchmen say? Rav Bar Shila says, they would say, for the Lord has chosen Zion, he has desired it for his habitation. This is my resting place forever. Here lies well for what I have desired it. Psalms 132, 13, 14. Okay. Hadranalach kol korbanot sibur. We finished this chapter of kol korbanot sibur and starting on to the new one, which is called Shtei Midot. The new chapter, Shtei Midot. Shtei Midot, says the Mishnah, Shtei Midot shel Yavesh b'mikdash. Yisachar nirchatzi Yisachar, Omer, Yisachar nirchatzi Yisachar, two sizes of measuring vessels for dry substances were used in the temple for measuring flour for the meal offerings. One held a tenth of an ephah, and the other held 1/2 of a tenth of an ephah. Rabbi Meir says there were 3 measuring vessels, one that held a tenth of an ephah, another one that also held a tenth of an ephah, and a third one that held 1/2 of a tenth of an ephah. Yisara mai hayom mishamesh shibo hayom moded lechol menachos lo haya moded lo b'shlosha lepar v'lo b'shel shnayim ayil ella modedan eschonos. What purpose did the tenth of an ephah? What purpose did the tenth of an ephah measuring vessel serve? It was the vessel with which one would measure flour for all the meal offerings. One would not measure the flour by using a measuring vessel of a size that held the entire volume of flour required at once, meaning neither with a vessel or 3/10 of an ephah for the meal offering accompanying the sacrifice of a bull, nor with a vessel of 2/10 of an ephah for the meal offering accompanying the sacrifice of a ram. Rather, one measures the flour for them by repeatedly using the tenth of an ephah measuring vessel to measure the required number of tenths. Chatzi saron haya mishamesh shebo haya moded chavite kohen gadol mechetza baboker umechetza barbayim. What purpose did the 1/2 of a tenth of ephah measuring vessel serve? It was the vessel that with which one would measure the flour for the high priest's griddle cake offering. A tenth of an ephah was required each day. He sacrificed half of it in the morning and the other half of it in the afternoon. That was the Mishnah of the Talmud. Tanya Haya Rabbi Meir Omer Ma Talmud Loimar Isaron Isara Nekeves HaEchad Milamed Shishtei Esrainos Hayu Bamikdash Achar Gadush Achar Matuk. The Gemara cites a Braita that clarifies Rabbi Meir's opinion. It is taught in a Braita that Rabbi Meir would say, what is the meaning when the verse states a tenth for every lamb? Numbers 28-29. The fact that the word tenth appears twice teaches that there were two measuring vessels that each held a tenth in the temple. One of them held that the volume when it was heaped, and the other one was slightly larger and held that same volume when the flour was leveled with the rim. Gadush shebo hayam moded l'chol menachos. The one that held a tenth of an ephah when heaped was the vessel with which one would measure the flour for all the real offerings. And now we turn to 87b. Machok shebo haya moded lechabite kohen gadol. The 1/10 held the one that held a tenth of an ephah when leveled was the vessel with which one would measure the flour for the high priest's griddle cake offering, and then that flour would be divided into 2 equal parts. Okay, we'll stop here. I'll pick it up with the Chachamim Omrim.